Action! I had to.
Okay, well, it's hard to follow the epic myths of Beethoven and Baroque symphony, but I don't know, I think Tchaikovsky can do it. I did Tchaikovsky in the Seasons, which is kind of a misleading name because it's actually 12 works that correspond with the months, not with the 4 seasons. So don't get confused with like Vivaldi's 4 seasons, they're very different. And the symbolism in Russian character pieces of the Romantic era. Tchaikovsky was a Romantic period composer. He was born with that lovely Russian name, which you can all pronounce in your head, so I don't have to. And he was born in Latkin district, Russia, on May 7th, 1840, to a wealthy family. So he had a good education in music and jurisprudence, which is the theory and study of law. So he was actually studying law. His musical educators didn't receive any talent as a pianist or a composer in school. But he kind of persisted in his study of music, and in 1861 to 1865 he attended the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and he studied harmony, counterpoint, and composition. And then in 1866, after he graduated, he became a professor of harmony at the Moscow Conservatory, which was a very prestigious place to work. His personal life was complicated. He taught and composed full time, and he was able to compose full time, which was odd for people of that era because it was hard to find money. But he was supported on commission for 13 years from Madame Nadezhda Vonek, who you see here. She was a wealthy widow, and she formed an attachment with Tchaikovsky and really enjoyed his music. And so she paid him a lot of money for simple compositions. He was very close to his family and specifically to his brothers. There are many, many hundreds of letters that he wrote to his brothers and that they wrote back to him throughout the course of his life. And many of the records that the world has of Tchaikovsky are from those letters. And then his life was fraught with scandal. A lot of it had to do with his sexual orientation. And a lot of the sources I found said that he was homosexual, and that at the time that was not widely accepted in Russia or really anywhere else. And so he had to hide that, and whether or not he did a good job of it, I don't know. Apparently not, because people are saying that he was that way.
Where's this related to Schubert, the Schubert article that we read in music history that time period? Is it roughly the same, or?
I think it would be roughly the same, because they were both Romantic era composers. I'm not sure the exact dates, but he's like in the 60s, 1860s. So,
yeah.
What? The 1860s, yeah. And so it was probably around the same time. So yeah, you can imagine what it was like for him if the same thing was happening with Schubert. And so he was convinced that he could kind of deny his nature and just become a normal person and a normal composer. And so he tried to marry this Belgian soprano. He formed an attachment to her, but she ended up marrying someone else, and he got over that very quickly. And then he married Antonina Mirzvikova, who was a student of his. And that was not a very good marriage. He did not have a good life as a married person, and so that didn't last very long, and he ended up actually having a mild suicide attempt and leaving that marriage. So,
Do you talk about that suicide tale? Do you talk about that?
do I? No, but I can.
What did you do?
He left. He was with her for like a few months, and then he left on trips just to get away from her. And on one of those trips, he just like stood in a lake and tried to contract pneumonia, and that was it. That was all he did. So needless to say, he didn't really get anything.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, kind of a failure. But
Well done.
yeah. Good for us that it was a failure, because otherwise we wouldn't have had all of these lovely, wonderful compositions. During his stressful marriage, he composed some of his most famous and successful works, including this right here. If you can read it, the Piano Concerto No. 1 in B flat. Also, there was his Fourth Symphony, and then I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's Eugene Onegin. It's an opera, and it's based on a famous story. And then around this time, toward the end of his life, suddenly Madame Belzec decided to end her financial support of his composing. And no one really knows why, but after 13 years, she stopped corresponding with him and stopped that financial support. By this time, he was a well enough established composer that he could make it financially by himself. But it was the fact that she left, she stopped correspondence, and they were such good friends that kind of took a toll on him emotionally. He visited America in 1891, and then upon returning to St. Petersburg, he contracted cholera, which is a disease of the small intestine causing vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, and death. So basically, you kind of just lose all of the water in your system, and that causes severe dehydration, and then you die, which he did on November 6, 1893. And it was an epidemic at that time, and people didn't know much about it. So it was kind of like the bubonic plague. If you get it, you're going to die. And he could have prevented it. It was easily prevented because it was caused by unboiled water. It was just in the water system, not used to boiling water. He knew this, but he didn't do it because I think he was a little depressed. And so.
Their mild suicide attempt.
Yeah, that actually worked. Yeah, good. Yeah. All right. So, his composition. This is just a general kind of overlay of the compositions he had. 3 ballets, and then you can read all of this yourself. The ones that I have listed are some of his most famous ones. You can see Eugene Onegin here. And then the Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and Sleeping Beauty, these two we've probably all heard of. 1812 Overture, commonly played on July 4th in the States at least. And then the Seasons here. And orchestral suites are just ordered sets of orchestral pieces that you would hear at a concert. And concertos are things that feature one instrument with orchestral accompaniment. So he was very, and many had choral works too, so he was very well-rounded, and he just kind of tried his hand at every type of composition. And then we come to the Seasons, which is his most famous work for piano. And here I found this quote. It's from this periodical that is a famous Russian periodical. And it describes what the editor wanted the character of which will correspond entirely to the titles of the pieces and the month in which they will be published in the journal. So he wanted specifically something that would correspond with each month and show the listener what each month was like, you know. Yeah. So in December 1873, Tchaikovsky was approached by Nikolai Bernard, editor of the Nouveau List, and he wanted 12 pieces for each month issue. And Tchaikovsky at this time had more time to write, and so he was working on Swan Lake. And this was kind of a just backhand, yeah, I'll do this just to get money kind of assignment. And so he would forget, and he charged his valet with reminding him, you have to write this piece this month. And he would just sit down and write a piece, just in one sitting, and then he would send it to the editor a month ahead of time. So that gives you kind of an idea of how prolific or how good of a composer he was. Okay, and the works in this pieces are character pieces because they represent ideas, scenes, or dramatic events, and they're representative of the character of something that is not musical. So am I. They became famous during the late 19th century, and these are the list of all of the 12. So you can see here, here's a Christmas tide for December, and it all kind of makes sense. Most of these follow an ABA pattern, and June, October, November, and December are the most popular pieces. However, we're going to look at February, which is Carnival, because the Carnival was very significant in Russia. And before this starts, the Carnival was a pagan celebration of winter during the first week before Lent begins. And it was mischievous, fun, energetic, reckless. Keep those words in mind as you listen to the piece. And there were masquerades, dancing, competition, and ice skating. As you can see here, these are accurate pictures for Carnival. So keep those pictures and those words in mind as you listen to the piece. So you can hear the excitement growing. Yeah, just imagine my costume. No, on that one too.
Is your winter months the same as that we are?
These are really short. But you can hear the beat section that we're now in, how it contrasts from the really energetic beginning. So now we're back to the main section. So there's that. You can see how that music. You can see how that music is evokes pictures of like masquerades and ice skating. I thought that was interesting. Apparently that's very popular in Russia where there's a lot of ice. So, what?
Sorry. What else do you
I don't know. They're just people in costume.
They like a fish.
They do look like
Or like
kids.
frogs.
Yeah. And going back to Carson's question, Russia, yeah, I looked up the weather patterns in Russia during months, and they're actually pretty similar to ours.
So, these pieces, do they evoke, so like the carnival, do they have carnivals in February, or is that just when he decided to write
Yes,
that one?
they do. The Lenten season begins in February.
So even though there's that picture down there in the parade,
Yeah.
and it looks,
Well, not all of Russia is covered in snow. I mean, there's some, probably in February it would have been, so this probably isn't entirely accurate. But like in June,
Okay.
it's warmer there.
Mhm.
So it follows the same weather pattern that we have, where it's warmer in the summer
Mhm.
and it's colder here. So this would have probably been snowy, and that's why they have ice skating.
okay,
But yeah, this would typically happen in February or towards the very beginning of March. And so it does make sense that it's a February carnival.
okay.
But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, and then we go to June, which is my personal favorite. It's a barcarolle, which is conjures up the romantic vision of a Venetian gondola, gently rocking by the lapping waves with the gondoliers, both fore and aft, singing to the gently rocking rhythm. So I put pictures here because it's a very melancholy song, which we don't really think is evocative of June, where, I don't know, happy and sunny. But he was thinking of a barcarolle, which is nostalgic and sentimental love songs are kind of associated with it. So it's much more thoughtful and much less energetic than the first one. And this one's longer, so I won't play the whole thing.
If we're looking at a school, he has more than just flexibility and convenience.
So here's an idea. So if you kind of imagine like a little boat rocking down the river, it's very laid back, very calm. And so that continues. And then, once we get to the end, there's another thing that's evocative of water. And I think of it more as waves rather than just kind of rolling and drifting. But you'll hear roll chords in the piano at the end. And those just kind of fade away. And so it's like, kind of if you're seeing a boat, like drifting away, you know, it gets smaller and smaller, and the chords get softer and softer, and so it kind of works with that. And also the rolling of the chords corresponds with the rolling of the water. And so there are a lot of these little tiny things that he uses to create the picture of the gondolier on the river. And there's a lot of repetition also, which corresponds with rowing. You know, that's a lot of repetition. And so he uses a lot of repetition within the music. Okay, then we go to November, which is very fun. I gave you, I think I did. Yes, I gave you a sheet music for that, November. It's called the Troika, which corresponds to the Russian Troika drive. And you'll see here, that has to do with horses, 3 horses pulling a sleigh. And the Troika is a cultural and literary icon of Russia. Traditional horses, or traditional Russian harness driving combination using 3 horses pulling a sleigh. They usually reached 45 to 50 kilometers per hour, which was very fast back then.
What, do you know how fast that is? Like, how many?
And so, they didn't have cars, so they got horses, and that was fast for them. And so, as you will hear, this movement takes a very quick pace. And there's a lot of symbolism in this one, I just love it. That's why I gave it to you. The first kind of example that I have has to do with a horse's gait. And typically the middle horse would trot, which is a slower pace than the outside horses, which canter. And so if you don't look at the music for now, but just listen, you'll kind of hear that. Because it'll sound like one hand is playing faster and more notes, and the other hand is just kind of bumping along, like the middle horse would. So just listen for now. This is a cute little old Russian guy. So it's like the outside horses are the da-da-da part, and so they're just cantering along, and then the trotting horse in the middle is the dent part. So you can kind of envision it. So you can hear the moderately quick tempo. It's not terribly fast. But then he has the rolling chords in the bass, which make it sound faster, quicker tempo. Okay, and those little chords were with the grace notes, you can see on page, 51, in the middle systems. Those sound like names to me of a horse, you know? So I think of a horse there. Even when I didn't know this was related to a horse-drawn carriage, I thought of a horse there. So you paint that picture very well. And also one thing that was towards the beginning that I neglected to say was he uses triplets on the bottom system of 49. He uses triplets in the right hand, the very top. And those triplets are used to represent the 3 horses that drove the troika. So there's that. Let's see if I can find that. That should be over here.
You click on this.
So it's almost like Christmas time, you know? So that's just making me happy. Okay, so now we go to September. And you have that also as a handout. This is the hunting song. And these titles, by the way, were titles that Tchaikovsky attributed to the month. It wasn't an editing him. So hunting was an old tradition in Russia for indigenous people. All people were permitted to use hunting grounds. It wasn't just wealthy people. During the Soviet rule, state-sponsored hunting clubs were formed, and the people used hounds, as you can see in this picture, and horses. They rode horses to hunt bears, wolves, which is right here. You can see they have the wolf, birds, and walruses. Yeah, which is interesting, but whatever.
Oh, what's up? I can't think of what it is.
A walrus, and you have the tusk, and it has
Big
a
field.
fin.
Right.
So,
I
and
couldn't
here
think
you
of
can see this guy's got a bear. So I'll just go right into that. Now the beginning, I think, sounds like the William Tell Overture, which is reminiscent of racing for me. Please start. Goes like da 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 da. Yeah. Here's the B section, and I think this sounds kind of like something stalking something. I can see a fox like trying to get up. It's very quiet. So instead of it getting faster and it starts chasing each other. One thing in that I do want to point out specifically is at the beginning. Listen to the bass here. Then as it continues, you'll hear that triplet motive. It's in the right hand neck. Well, you can just look at it. Here, it's in the bass, and then on the measure below it, it's in the right hand. And so it's like echoing trumpet calls, and they use trumpets in the hunt to call to each other and call to their animals. And so you see that kind of echoing effect throughout the song. I didn't point that out, and I'm sorry, but it's there. And so it's kind of a subtle little thing. Okay, so for my last little piece, I think there's one. I'm going to do an activity because this is fun. So I have a recording of January at the fireside, and I also have a poem which it was written off of. And I'm not going to show you the poem, so you have to close your eyes when I go to the next slide. But I want you all to, if you have a pencil, I have a pencil here if you want one. Just write down like 5 words that you think of when you hear the song, or think of them or whatever, keep them in your mind. And then once we're done, I won't play the whole thing, but once I've played some of it, we'll compare it with what the poem is. And see what it is. Okay, so close your eyes. Don't look at this. Okay.
You look now?
Yes, you may look now.
Okay.
Oh, and
You guys hot as this.
yeah.
Hot guys.
Don't tell the words for that. Okay, here we go. What were your words? Karsten.
I had snow falling and blowing.
Okay.
Kind of. That's all it's kind of, and then that like that random part where you ended it, something going on. I kind of felt like a mouse running across the floor.
Okay. Yeah, like the thing, all the silent except for a mouse or whatever that is.
So, pretty much, yeah.
And she was doing.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's just what I don't know, because it was random, it was just,
It was
and
a
it
little
was gone.
random. Yeah,
And it was
and
gone.
he
I mean,
is-
eventually it comes back,
Yeah.
but just that first 2 times it was, what was that?
Well, a lot of criticism of Tchaikovsky was that he didn't expand upon his motives, and he had too many motives in that piece. And so that is perfectly sensible, that it was random.
But then it came back,
Yeah.
and it kind of all worked out, so.
Okay. Amanda?
I thought of like family, and it kind of brought me thinking like almost Christmassy. At the beginning, kind of sounded like probably the name I thought of what I thought, like kind of sounded like a family getting together, being all fun together, and then eating dinner and stuff, and just having fun together. And then the little section made me think of the night is over, they're going out in the snow.
Okay. Okay, that's good. DJ?
Since we're over my race,
Chocolate. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
It also just seemed like something that you'd listen, that you'd like be playing like over a sound system, like you're
Right.
somewhere, or like, you know, you're like
Yeah.
a ski lodge or something. And it's just something that seems like it would be playing
Right.
at that
Or
moment.
like they're just sitting on a couch watching the snow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here is the poem that was written by Alexander Pushkin that it's based off of. It's called The Dream. Not long ago, in a charming dream, I saw myself, a king with crown's treasure. I was in love with you, it seemed, and heart was beating with a pleasure. I sang my passion song by your enchanting knees. Why, dreams, you did prolong my happiness forever. But God deprived me not of whole their favor. I only lost the kingdom of my dreams. So that's different than what we thought of. But, you know, Pushkin wasn't envisioning January when he wrote that. A lot of you said being with people. I was in love with you, it seems. So it kind of creates an endearing sense of being with people. Yeah. So it's interesting to see different people's perspectives on what Tchaikovsky wrote and how he related that to his music and to the things that he based his music off of. And so the period pieces that are the seasons are just interesting to look at from that perspective. So thanks for listening.